Fellow bass nerds, hope you're having a wicked day today. Today we're going to be looking at the 10 must-have gadgets every single pro bass player should have in their kit bag. And I'm not talking about gimmicks here, I'm talking about the stuff that I've actually, the painful experiences I've seen pro bass players go through when they don't have this stuff in their kit bag. So with that said, let's do it. Okay, so before we jump into the top 10 gadgets that pro bass players should have in their kit bag, I just want to give a shout out to having a kit bag in general, right? So you can use your gig bag, the front pocket and stuff like that, but sometimes, for me, it just gets a little bit heavy, having all of the stuff inside the actual gig bag and all of the other stuff, right? So I really like to use one of these, which is actually the bag for a Van de Clay head. Fantastic amp company if you've not checked them out. But I use this as my kit bag and I've got a ton of juicy stuff in here. Now I said top 10, right? But I'll be honest, there might be a few more things. And this is in no specific order either, right? So first up is you've got to have some kind of bass stand. Now we all know the old school ones with the metal piping and stuff like that, and they were always a pain in the ass to take to gigs. You don't need to do that now. You can get really cool ones like this that are really portable. I love this. I can just chuck it in the case and it opens just like that, okay? And then we've got these little slidey things here, slide down so it's more, more bassy instead of like for an acoustic guitar. And then my bass obviously just sits on it like that, right? So it's really, really simple. I can stick it next to my amp and I'm not balancing basses or doing silly stuff like that, right? So next up is you've got to have a tuner. Now you might be thinking, oh, that's obvious. Trust me, I've been to 2 specific gigs where I've just seen like tuning disasters go on, and I'm not talking about open mic night disasters. I'm talking about really serious gigs where there's just been a tuning issue for whatever reason. They didn't have a tuner. Anyway, I use one of these, which is a Boss chromatic tuner. They're really fantastic, but I also really recommend these clip-ons as well. These are really popular. This is a Korg clip-on tuner. You can have it on all of the time, so all you need to do is clip it on the headstock like that, right next to little Kermit there, and then you can be playing and then also be checking your tuning while all of the groove shenanigans are going down. Okay, so number 8 is a spare cable. Now I've always got a minimum of 2 cables with me, a minimum of 2 cables. Obviously I'm actually using one right now, which is right there, okay? This is my spare one. It's always in my bag, and this isn't, I've got other ones as well that I generally have with me, but a minimum of 2 because you don't want to break these on a gig. And, and again, I've seen this actually happen on gigs. Okay, next up is you've got to have some 9-volt batteries. This is a must, especially if you're running pedals or you've got an active bass. Now, on the active bass front, I'm speaking from experience. I had a terrible gig where my battery started dying on the gig and it didn't have an active passive switch. Not all active basses have an active passive switch, which means if your battery dies on the gig, you are going to die. Your bass is going to die on the gig. Like, luckily I got through it. Ever since then, I've always got a pack of 9 volts on me, just for the active bass if it's not got an active passive switch, but if it hasn't, and also for your pedals, if something happens with your power block or something like that. 9-volt batteries, they're a must. Okay, so now for number 6. Number 6 is, let me just get this out. I can't get out. It's stuck in. Come out, you little monkey. So next up is snips. You've got to have some snips. They are so useful. If you've ever tried to change your strings, without a pair of these, you know what I'm talking about. Okay, so number 5 is a screwdriver. You've got to have a screwdriver. Obviously, for basses, it's mostly with a Phillips head or crosshead, depending on which country you're coming from. And this is for a multitude of reasons. You might need to take the truss rod cap off if something's going on with your truss rod. We'll get onto that in a minute. You might want to alter something down here. You might want to take the back plate off because you need to change the battery or something. If you've not got a battery compartment, you must have a crosshead or Phillips screwdriver in your kit bag. So next up is something a little bit nerdy, but it really helps me and it's got me out of trouble in the past. It is a metal rule like this, okay? And the reason that I specifically love having a metal rule is that if anything's going on with the truss rod, say if you've got a gig in another country, the climate's different, your truss rod goes out of whack, you need to adjust your truss rod, you want to be able to check your string heights, right? To make sure that you're adjusting everything that you need to adjust. So, because you don't want to be winging that stuff. Trust me, get a little one of these that you can just slip it in your kit bag and it will come in handy in the future. Now, next up is a set of Allen keys or Allen wrenches. Now, here's what an Allen wrench looks like. We all know that. Now, again, these are really important. Most truss rods, are adjusted using an Allen wrench, but also, all of these down here, again, if your truss rod goes out of whack, something like that, you're going to need an Allen wrench to be able to adjust the saddles of your bass. And as you can see here, I've got a full set in the case. Okay, so next up is something that may seem like obvious, but having a rag like this, a string rag, just to, rub down your strings after a gig or a session is a really great way to lengthen the lifespan of your strings and make sure that, you're not leaving all kinds of dead skin and stuff in your strings after a gig or a session, because it does happen and your strings will die earlier. So if you can get a string rag, you won't be sorry. Okay, so this isn't the last one on my list that I want to show you. In here, I've got plectrums, because in my experience, whenever I don't have a plectrum in my kit bag, somebody always says, hey, can you play this track with a pick? So I make sure to have this little can of plectrums of various gauges, various thicknesses in my kit bag because they always come in handy. Okay, so I've got a few more for you in my list. Now this one is obvious, but again, I'm just going to shout it out because I've seen at least 3 gigs where bass players and guitar players have been caught, pro gigs, people have been paying money to go and see these guys and they haven't had any spare strings, okay? Make sure you have a set of spare strings. Please, for me, do it for me. Do it for me and the audience. Don't be the guy or the girl that gets caught short, breaks a string on a gig and ends up, playing a gig without a string. Now, I would love to tell you that I am so organized that this hasn't happened to me. It has happened to me. And it was awful. It was awful because I think it was either my A or E string. I think it was my A string that snapped on a gig. It was an A string snapped on a gig. I didn't have a spare set of strings. And because my action was set low on my bass, when the A string snapped, the tension on the neck, obviously there was more relief on the neck, so the strings pulled closer to the board. So the only string on the gig that I could play was the E string, and I had to do that for a full set. Trust me, not recommended. And lastly, and remember this list is for pro players, like obviously if you're just starting out, this list will be really helpful as well. But depending on what, if you are a pro player, for me, I always make sure that I've got my in-ears in my kit bag, because I've been on gigs in the past where, you needed to wear in-ears and they just give you these horrific, things that you've got to kind of force into your ear canals. So if you're a pro player, get yourself your own set of in-ears. They're really fantastic. I'm just going to double check. Oh, and for me specifically, I obviously need the gloves, obviously, because I've got focal dystonia, if you're wondering. I'm not wearing this to be, it's not a fashion statement or anything like that. But if you have enjoyed this video, it would make my day if you click the like button below. And if you're not subscribed to the channel, get it on, get subscribed, and then you'll get notified next time we release a video just like this. And if you want to go a bit deeper with me, in terms of learning the bass and finding out what we do here at Scott's Bass Lessons, go to scottsbasslessons.com and check it out. It's the #1 place online you can learn bass with some of the best bass educators on the planet. So go do it, and hopefully I'll catch you over there. Take it easy, and I'll see you in the shed.